Welcome to the Concast. I'm former dishwasher, failed musician, and absurdist writer John Conrath. On today's show, I'll be talking to Jeff O'Brien, writer of Very True Tales, Big Boobenstein, Byron the Barbarian, and Heart-Shaved Box. Yeah, we'll get into the UFO cult stuff a little later. I was kind of serious about that, but yeah, I don't know if you're into living on 40 acres where you have to dig your own toilet, but
I could get down with that.
Yeah. So anyway, so Jeff O'Brien, or I still think of like Jeff Emo Bryan when you pulled that little joke going on.
A lot of people did.
That's kind of been stuck in my head. But yeah, so you're, I think, the first person we've talked to here that, we've been on Facebook. I had to look it up this morning, and I think it was August 2014 when we first started talking. But we, Facebook, there's like that Facebook distortion field where you know each other, but you don't know each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like the first time we've talked. So
yeah, I'm actually a total scumbag. I'm sorry to break it to you. We'll find that out soon.
Well, I mean, I got that from Facebook, but but yeah, I didn't know your total background. And do you have a website, by the way, or do you just do Facebook?
No, I'm the laziest dude ever. I put no effort into anything other than actually writing.
Yeah, you should look into that. But so I was trying to look up kind of your background, or anything about kind of when you how you came up or when you did. And you're a New Hampshire guy by default, or
yes, I moved here 7 years ago.
Oh, were you originally from that area, or the Northeast, or were you?
Yeah, I grew up just outside of Boston.
Okay, yeah, I've only been to New Hampshire like once, and it's a little weird, not weird, but it's like it's its own little thing up there, out in the middle of nowhere, like the live free or die kind of thing. But it's also
it's the south of the north.
Yeah, but it's also at least a lot of the people I always knew from there were. It's kind of like almost like a Boston bedroom community or something.
Kinda, yeah.
I mean, you got people that do commute in, but I mean, just as far as whatever it is, Bruins and Patriots, and that's kind of your identity. And I know I give you shit about the Patriots,
yes, you
as I should, but yeah, I'm not even really that much of a football fan. I'm a Packers fan by marriage, but
I kind of got that you were more of a ball buster than an actual football fan.
Yeah, when we get to baseball, that's a different topic, but yeah. So you grew up outside of Boston, and I guess one of the things I picked up is that you kind of got your start in music, or
yes,
kind of garage bands, or when you got started, you were a drummer and then a bassist, or what do you consider?
It all started back around the time I was 6 years old. I really wanted to take karate lessons, and my brother, who's a few years older, was taking piano lessons. And not too long into the karate lessons, it became clear that I'm a complete pussy.
Yeah.
And, it really wasn't working out. Like, I didn't like actually having to hit and get hit by people. So then I found myself taking piano lessons instead. And I hated it then, but it was really valuable in that it gave me the foundation knowledge of how music works. But yeah, I ended up, when I got old enough to start bands and stuff in junior high and high school, if I ended up being a drummer, because every kid, which you probably remember because you played, every kid is a guitarist.
Yeah.
There's a decent amount of bass players, but everyone always needed a drummer. And I was pretty fascinated with Roger Taylor from Queen. I used to watch like the Queen Greatest Hits VHS all the time when I was a kid. And I was like, I want to do that. So I ended up a drummer.
And drummer it's kind of a weird, because exactly what you said, like everybody was a guitar player, and to be a drummer, it's like you kind of have to have parents that are really supportive or that really don't give a shit. Like with the guitar, anybody can, buy $100 guitar, plug it into a little Fender Rumble, put in the headphones, and just practice all day in their bedroom. But like for drums, it's like you need the whole layout. You need a room. It needs to be either it needs to be soundproof, or your parents need to not give a shit enough for you to learn how to play, and
my parents were surprisingly tolerant when it came to noise.
Yeah, and you either have to have a car, or you have to be able to borrow a truck, or do whatever. Like you can't just get a gig bag on your shoulder and take the bus to your friend's house. You got to haul all that shit everywhere.
Yeah, I think part of what led to me I would say retiring. That assumes I actually made money. Quitting music was a part of that. Like, I was always not just the drummer, but I seemed to be like the driver too. I was the one who always had to have that vehicle. And then it's like, oh, hey, after the show, hey, Jeff, drop me off here, drop me off there. And eventually I realized it was getting old.
Yeah, and drumming is also like a physical, like much more physical, I think, than... I mean, even those guys like Neil Peart from Rush, it's just like you get to a certain point and it's like, okay, I'm done. My body is shot. Yeah. Which I always, no offense, thought, like the big fat drummers, like you see, like the guy from Cheap Trick or whatever. It's like, how does it? Because playing drums is like a song is like running a mile. You know? Yeah. You play an hour, that's like running a half marathon or something.
Yeah, I feel like when you're drumming, it's all I compare it to golfing, but not that I golf. Like, say if I went to the driving range today, and I swung the club a bunch of times, I'd be hurting in all these muscles I don't know I have, because those are like the golf muscles. But like, so when you're drumming, you're working out like those drumming muscles, which aren't really like your biceps or your pecs. So like your drumming muscles are in great shape. But the rest of your body can look like absolute shit.
Yeah. And who's the Fleetwood Mac drummer?
Mick Fleetwood?
Yeah. He's not exactly a specimen of health either, but he's still pounding away 40 years later.
He's 106 years old. So.
Yeah. So what, I guess you came up on, because you graduated probably about around the turn of the century.
2000, yeah.
Yeah, so you probably came up in that whole... Are you more like a punk guy or a metal guy, or what were you into then?
I started out metal. I was the early 90s MTV Headbangers Ball generation. Yeah. So, I discovered White Zombie through Beavis and Butthead.
Oh, yeah.
And when that album came out, I was just absolutely enamored with it. And I picked up lots of stuff from both 120 Minutes and Headbangers Ball, but mostly I was like metal, hard rock, like White Zombie, Kiss, Rush, Deep Purple, early Metallica. Even when I was a young kid, I knew that everything after Injustice for All kind of sucked. So it was really metal all the way, but then in like 7th grade, Weezer came out.
Oh, yeah.
It totally changed everything. I stayed a metalhead, but I was like, I related to the Blue album, and even all the B-sides. That stuff just spoke to me. So that kind of changed me a little bit, sort of opened me up to all different genres. Which is kind of just like, with my reading and writing. Like, I can't identify as any one thing. I love too much shit. So I never really fall in any one specific location on the map.
Yeah. And so when you started, or when you were doing this, you were in a couple bands, or did you touring or recording or any of that stuff?
Oh, yeah. Nothing that ever really amounted to much. I was always have been in New England. When I was in towards the end of high school, late 90s, and then after high school, early 2000s, like the hardcore scene was huge. Sadly, it was short-lived, but it was huge, and so I was in a lot of hardcore bands. Never did like a full country, tour across the country, but played all over New England. But that, like I said, the hardcore scene was short-lived. I think by 2001, it was kind of over, except for like a few bands like Blood for Blood and Hatebreed.
Yeah.
So I kept playing, but I totally kind of sold out just because I wanted to be in bands. I ended up being in this very kind of Britpop influenced band. Actually got flown out to LA, recorded a demo for Capitol Records, and they told us that they didn't know, like, what the fuck were we thinking? Bringing you guys out here, you guys are terrible. And they flew us back home, so...
Well, that was when they actually before the collapse, when they had money to fly bands record demos.
But that was, what a valuable experience. I mean, not only did I get to party like a celebrity for a week in LA, but I learned, I was only 19 at that point, and I learned at 19 that, the music industry is full of vile human beings and not to trust anyone, so... I came away from that learning more than I thought I would.
And you were all pretty much pre-internet at this point, right? I mean, it was, because I'm guessing, the big collapse was right around, it started when Napster came out and all that stuff, but it seemed like it was a little bit after that the MP3 revolution and the iPod and everything pretty much just did away with record stores.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that there were iPods. There definitely wasn't iTunes back then. There was still, I know I was still going to the store and buying CDs at that time.
Yeah, I remember an early trip to Boston, like maybe 95, I think I was there. Yeah. There used to be that Tower Records. Huge Tower Records. I don't even know what that is anymore.
That building is pretty sure it's a travel agency now.
Yeah, I just remember that place was just I was a serious CD head, CD collector back then. I used to just buy, I would just go A to Z through the whole section and just grabbing stuff off the wall. And plus, part of it was the magic of it was some of it you knew, there's like a new Dream Theater album or something, I'm going to get that. But some of it you're just looking at the cover and thinking, I wonder what this sounds like. Or, I guess, so-and-so talked about it in an interview, I'll grab it. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like now where you listen to 5 seconds and it's like, yeah, that song sucks, that sucks.
No, in fact, I remember one of the most transforming moments of my life, and this is going to be the most, like, unmetal thing I've ever said. I bought the first Smiths album in high school when I was sort of stuck between. I had been a punk and I had been a metalhead, but then I was kind of getting into some goth stuff and I was getting into The Cure. So I blindly bought the first Smiths album, not knowing a single song on it. I just had heard so much about them, mostly from chicks at punk shows that I wanted to get with. So I bought that, and I just remember the feeling of going home, putting it in my CD player, and then being like, holy shit, this is different. This is like exactly what I was looking for. And and so to this day, I am still a diehard Smiths and Morrissey fan.
Yeah, it's always weird when that kind of stuff happens, because it happens to me more with books now, because, I would just pick up some random book of, like a J.G. Ballard book. I think I picked up I found a copy of his book, The Atrocity Exhibition, that, I was in New York and people will just put stuff on the curb when they get kicked out of their apartment, and there's a big stack of books, and there was... The Atrocity Exhibition and a couple of those research books, like a William S. Burroughs one, and I was like, I just grabbed all that shit. It's like, I got to get it now before it rains and turns soggy. And then I read it and I was like, holy shit, I got to go back and buy every book this guy's written. And so, yeah, it's always weird when that kind of stuff happens. But so how did you get started writing then? If you were doing the music stuff, were you always writing, or was there a kind of a point where
I always had the idea. Go back as far as to when I was maybe 6 years old, and I saw. Do you remember those rotoscope animated Lord of the Rings?
Oh yeah, the ones from the 70s, I think.
Yeah,
it was.
I was fascinated with those, and I would get crayons and construction paper, and I would write basically what was Lord of the Rings fan fiction done by a 6-year-old. And I always knew I wanted to do it. It was just a matter of when I would finally get around to it. As I got older in high school, I was heavily involved in music. Between school, work, and band, there's really no time to do much writing. But then, I didn't put my first book out until I was 30. That was 5 years ago. And I had been working on it for 5 years, half serious, sometimes totally serious, other times, and completely forgetting about it, other times. It was a really bad horror novel that I don't even talk about anymore. And thankfully, due to self-publishing, I could just make it disappear without any consequences. So I don't know. What really inspired me, I suppose, was I could take some from movies. I always wanted to take movies like Deathstalker 2 and Night of the Creeps and just your typical 80s B-movie classics. I always wanted there to be books that were like those. Because I love that genre. And, I love serious horror and serious sci-fi too, but I always wondered, why can't this schlock and this campiness exist in literary form? So that was something I always wanted to do.
Yeah. So you're talking about the trauma type movies from the 80s, all the, I don't know if those are direct to video. Sometimes they would be in some, you go to New York and there might be one theater playing it, but definitely the kind of up all night type cable movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the Joe Bob Briggs,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and it's interesting. I mean, the other part of that is those movies had an aesthetic that they weren't, I guess, corporate. They were, they weren't like a Friday the 13th or Halloween or something where it was, those are good, but they were, multi-million-dollar things that came out of the major studios. It seemed like most of those B movies were either just some guys running around with cameras in Australia or somewhere, cutting it all together, or just working on a low budget, getting the stuff, because you'd read the credits and it would be the director would be the producer and he would be one of the screenwriters and he would be zombie number 2 or something.
Like Bad Taste.
Exactly. That movie. Yeah. That I remember when I first found that on VHS and it was just watched it a million times. And, I had a buddy that I used to work with that was you got to check this out. And he had the dub of it off of something. And, and we were just rewinding it and watching it over and over. And that was at that time when I was I wanted to do that. We need to go get a camcorder and we need to get some Caro syrup and some food coloring and make some blood and having no idea how much. I mean, you could probably crank one of those movies out for $50,000 or something, but it's we had no idea, no script.
I think a lot of guys like us probably started out wanting to make movies, but that's not a really complicated. I mean, that's not a really easy thing to do. I know that's where I originally I was I want to direct movies. And then I realized that I could write a screenplay, but what's ever going to happen with it? Then I moved on to doing comic books, which I did for a while. Me and a friend of mine, we just wrote a couple. He was the artist, I was the writer.
Yeah.
But after that, kind of ran its course, I realized, well, he was my friend, and it was like his project as much as it was mine. Now, finding an artist that I don't know is going to be impossible because that costs a shitload of money. So
Yeah, and that's the same thing with films because I looked into I fell down a serious rabbit hole of how can you make movies and how I even went out and bought a camcorder and thought, okay, I'm going to get started. This was like 20 years ago when I first. But then it's like I started reading all these books, like that Ramirez book about what was that movie that he made for $19,000 or whatever. But yeah, his first movie. But yeah, I started reading about Tarantino and Clerks and all that stuff, and then I realized, man, you gotta be like a dictator, and you gotta get a bunch of people together and work with them and all that. And I'm an introvert, so
do it the same.
yeah, and I can't hustle to get the money together like those guys would, and I mean, I guess now there's Kickstarter, but you always hear about those guys, getting credit cards and getting all their friends. And I remember Ramirez did medical experiments on himself, or did those drug trial things where you lock yourself in a thing for 6 weeks and they fill you full of whatever drug they're testing that week, and you hope you don't grow a second set of tits and get out of there and alive. But I just didn't have the.
Rather than go through that, I decided, well, why don't I just write? I'll just write, and I started writing like short horror stories, not really knowing where I wanted to go as a writer, just knowing that I was a fan of sci-fi, but I'm not like smart enough to write sci-fi, so I just kind of wrote some horror stories. And this is like 2005, right when I quit music, and I don't believe there was a create space back then. I think self-publishing was an entirely different entity then than it is now. So I just sort of wrote and did nothing with my work for 7 years or so, and then finally, for a friend of mine self-published her book, and I said, "Oh, how did you do that?" She's like, "Oh, check out this website, CreateSpace." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is like so easy."
Yeah, I remember. I mean, we've talked about this before. I think there was iUniverse was one of the things before CreateSpace, and that's where I got started. But I think once Amazon saw that stuff was taking off, that's where. Well, Amazon bought CreateSpace. They were doing their own thing before that, but I think it was right after that the Kindle started up. When was it? 07 or so? 06, 07, 08?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
But so you had a friend that did it, and you just kind of went in and did it. And at first, were you were just like using your own Word docs and doing your own covers, or how did you? When
I first put out my first book, the one that I try to make disappear and don't ever talk about, I used a CreateSpace cover, and the formatting was a mess. Like, I thought it was great because it was a book with my name on it and my words in it. But then pretty soon after, I made a lot of contacts with people who knew what they were doing on Facebook, and I started seeing like lots of other self-published books that had the same exact cover template as mine.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I might want to have to look into this actually having a real cover done.
Yeah, I've done a couple of books with that cover creator thing where you
atmospheres,
and I think I did another one too. The Earworm Inception was the same thing. A couple books before that. But yeah, it's always funny that I mean I did it because I'm lazy, but I mean I used my own picture, but and Atmospheres was tough too because I actually went to that site Fiverr.com and was trying to get somebody there to do a cover for me.
Mhm.
And I had no idea what it was. I was just like, just make it like some David Lynch shit. Make it, whatever, atmospheric. And some guy from, I don't even remember where it was, Kosovo or Belgrade or like somewhere in the Eastern Europe, said, yeah, we'll do it, and did this cover. And I was like, I don't really like it at all. So it's on rumor.com somewhere. I did a big article about the saga of the cover, but yeah, covers are tough. And you, looking at some of your books now, it seems like you're really kind of hit your stride with covers. Are you working with an artist usually? Like when I was looking at like your Byron the Barbarian series, you've got some good art there. And
Yeah, I use most of my books. You'll notice they have kind of the same style to them on the covers. That's a guy named Kendall Hart. He's this dude. He makes his living making gigantic statues of like Bigfoot, and even like I think he gets commissioned to make like Venom and Spider-Man. And he's just this insanely talented guy who whips these covers out for me like in no time at all, and charges a really reasonable rate. So I use him a lot, and Justin Coons, who's you've probably heard his name if you're associated with the Bizarro world at all.
Yeah.
He did Big Boobenstein, and he did The Daughters of Big Boobenstein. So I found a couple people who just are super reasonable, super reliable, and they do some great work.
Yeah, and that's always the catch with self-publishing is, it gives you the tools that you can do this stuff yourself, as opposed to if you went to a publisher, they would be doing all this for you. But with the catch is if you went to a publisher, you get what you pay for, I guess, in that, they'll do the cover and they'll do the layout and all that, but it's coming out of your pocket in the back end usually whereas with self-publishing, you can do it as cheap as you want, but, or you can find somebody to pay a few bucks to do the cover, or pay somebody to do, your editing, or you can spend as much as you want on that, but it's kind of up to you to do what you want to do.
Yeah, well, what I love most about self-publishing is my success or my failure is entirely my fault. So I can either take all the credit or take all the blame, and it's just me, and there's no one else. Like, there's no relationships that can get sour through bad business or failure or whatever. It's just all me.
Yeah.
And I can fix it myself and figure out how to move on without having to consult anybody else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think once you start to learn the tools and figure it out, you can get that stuff down. I think once you get a good computer and you learn some Photoshop and you learn a little bit of the ins and outs, you can figure all that stuff out. But it's definitely, I think it's what you put into it. And I've seen some pretty bad books. I've seen some other books, but it's definitely, I think one of the things you've got going on is you definitely do have a style between all your different books, even things that are a little bit different of genre. And that's something I wanted to ask about or talk about is, you seem to jump around a little bit in between genres, and I'm curious what you kind of think is your wheelhouse, or what you consider yourself as far as different stuff. Because I don't read that much horror, but it seems like you do horror, but you're also more of a comedy writer, or you put comedy elements in that. So what do you kind of consider yourself with that?
I've probably answered that question at many different ways, many different times, because I'm still not sure. But I think comedy is probably the key word. And like I was saying, just like with music, with books, I like so much stuff that I can't settle on just being a writer of any one genre. So what I've kind of done, and this is where as you know, my influence of Piers Anthony, his influence on me rather, where that comes in. I embrace sort of all genres, and I'll write them all, but I want them to be, I want them to have my fingerprint on them.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you've read much Piers Anthony.
Yeah, a little bit.
But he's written everything. He's written serious horror. He's written serious science fiction. But he breaks all the genre rules. And, you could pick up a Piers Anthony book with no cover on it, without his name on it, and if you read it, you would know it's his. Because he just has that unique, rule-breaking, genre-bending style that he puts on everything. And no matter where it falls on, in what section of the bookstore, it's Piers Anthony. That's the genre.
Yeah, he has a unique voice, I guess, that transcends all that. And I think a lot of successful, Asimov was a good one. I think Asimov wrote a book in every section of the Dewey Decimal System. He
pretty much.
Wrote philosophy. He wrote religious books, even though he was an atheist.
Yeah.
He wrote, everything like that across that. And even Stephen King. I know it's popular to shit on Stephen King, but he's jumped around a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe not like hard science fiction, but he's done stuff that's in horror, even just more drama or anything like that. But you still pick it up, and it's Stephen King.
Yeah, Eyes of the Dragon, his fantasy book. It's fantasy, but you can just tell it's Stephen King.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we first kind of came into each other's orbit through Rooster Republic Press, who did a series called Tall Tales with Short Cocks.
Mm-hmm. My first acceptance ever.
I think that was probably one of my first. I found them on Duotrope, and saw they had an open call for their first book, and I decided, okay, I'm going to write a story that's really outside of my wheelhouse that fits into that. And then that's how I met Arthur Graham and Seamus and all those folks, and I think it branched out from there. The first book was, they called themselves Bizarro Press then.
Yeah.
And then kind of had to change their name to Rooster Republic.
Yeah.
But you were in, I think, the fourth one.
Yes.
The one with the taper on the cover.
Yes, the one with the classic Dangerous Later story about his turning into a taper.
And I think that was the first one that I didn't have anything in, and it wasn't by design. I was just in the middle of a couple of different things at that point.
Yeah.
I was trying to write serious science fiction at that, I think, when that episode came out. But I had something in number 5. But so I wanted to talk a little bit about Bizarro. I don't know if it's interesting, because reading your stuff, I don't really consider you a Bizarro writer, capital B Bizarro.
Me neither. I never did.
You've never done anything with Eraserhead?
I got rejected from the new Bizarro author series in 2013.
Oh, really? Was it a book that you ended up doing yourself, or?
Yeah, it ended up being Franken Fairy.
Oh, okay.
That was still even getting rejected from them was cool, because it was Kevin L. Donaghy.
Yeah.
God, he's just the nicest guy in the world. He sent me the nicest rejection I've ever seen. He started out, at the beginning of the email, I thought I was accepted. It was like, man, excellent story, really great. And I don't say that a lot. But we're not going to pick it up. But if you ever have any pictures or anything, please, let me know. So it was like the nicest rejection I've ever experienced.
My only real interaction with him was, and I don't remember who prompted me to do this, but I sent him an email that said, I have a 1-word pitch for you. And I said, and that was it. Just that was in the subject line. And then the body of the message was 1 word, and it was Cthulhu.
Cthulhu?
Yes.
Nice.
And I'll throw that out there if anybody, that's your free book idea of the day if somebody else wants to write it. Because
he wasn't chomping on the bait for that.
He said he said, well, I thought about it. That might be a lawsuit, but if he has something else, let me know.
Yeah.
But if anybody wants to do that and wants to, I don't know if the Lovecraft family or foundation or whatever will descend on you like they did with the D&D Fiendfolio lawsuit, but
I think they probably will.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you have to spell it a little different or do something, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm kind of 50-50 on the Bizarro movement. I think it's some interesting stuff has come out of it. I mean, it's I don't really consider myself a Bizarro, but a Bizarro writer, or at least capital B. But I think it's some of the aesthetic that because they're like big trauma people and into that kind of low budget horror and all that. But I think it seems like your stuff is, because it's a little more horror oriented. It's like it kind of goes above and beyond what Bizarro does, and there's some absurd humor in Bizarro, but I consider myself an absurdist writer, and there's a couple other people that are within Bizarro that do that, and there's some people that are. But yeah, it's hard to find something to glom into, especially if you consider yourself a comedy writer first and foremost, because it seems like comedy, people think of like, whatever, Tina Fey books or, it seems like every comedian has a book out now, and some of them are, stand-up comedians, and, some of them are good, but they're not really humor books as much as they are like biographies about.
Yeah. Well, I just credit Bizarro for being the first community of people that took any interest in me whatsoever. So after I put out my first book, the one that I don't like to talk about, it was a serious themed horror novel. I found that writing serious horror was kind of depressing.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, all right, well, I had not heard of Bizarro at this point. So I was like, all right, I'm going to write something totally different, something more really in tune with my personality. So I wrote the Halloween Orgy Massacre. But I self-published it, but the horror community wouldn't really take it seriously because of the title. And then those who did actually take a chance with it were turned off by like the non-traditional things I put in, and I don't just mean like that it's about horny vampire aliens who bite people and causes them to go into a sexual overdrive. But I wanted to like really make it wacky with like chicks from other dimensions and who are like sorceresses from like 80s sword and sorcery movies.
Yeah.
So people were like, this isn't a horror novel. This is like a crappy fantasy novel mixed in with a bad B movie. I'm like, no, it's a horror story. Why can't it have sword-wielding, buxom, hot chicks? Like,
yeah,
the dimensions. Why is it not horror? It's still a horror book. So yeah, the horror community was sort of like, whatever you say, Jeff.
And the horror community, I mean, I haven't been into that much, but I know the science fiction community is kind of the same way in that, like, I wrote this book a couple years ago called The Memory Hunter, and it's kind of a take on a cyberpunk book, and my weird twist on it was that it's written as if it took place in 2007, but it's written as if it was written in the 1980s.
Uh-huh.
So it's like it's 2007. There's been a nuclear war with the Soviet Union, which still exists, and there's flying cars in 2007, but there's still like analog telephones and dot matrix printers or whatever. So it's like if you were watching Blade Runner in now, and it's like, well, that didn't happen, and that's So I did that, but there was like I when I went out and got reviews for it and stuff, like people didn't get the joke and were like, this can't be science fiction. We have to, you have to do this and this and also the plot in that book is like, I write a lot of unplotted experimental shit, but that was like my idea of I'm going to write a book that is like so exactly plotted that it's like the hero is on page 30 exactly is going to be the turning point for this and it follows that exactly. But even then, like people were like, well, the plot should have had more of a rising action and whatever, and it's like, come on, I mean, why? You're taking yourself way too seriously here.
That's a problem I find quite a bit in most communities.
Yeah, and it's kind of like just do what you want to do. I mean, who cares? Yeah. I mean, it's like saying like, oh, your song has to have a guitar solo right here before the chorus. It's like, well, fuck it. No, do an album that has no guitar solos.
Right.
Or that's all guitar solos or whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, like Load and Reload.
Yeah, or Saint Anger. Make your snare drum sound like, well, okay, that's a problem. But
a wet fart.
Yeah, or a tin can in a giant garage or something. Yeah. So so when was the point where you kind of started to catch with that? I mean, I know you did a bunch of books, Heart Shaved Box and Big Boobenstein, and you did the Byron books, Byron the Barbarian. I mean, you've done, what have you done, like a dozen books or so in the last 5 years?
I should have a book coming out next week. I'm just waiting for the cover to get done, and that will be number 15.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Going back to what we were saying earlier with the Bizarro, not Bizarro, even like, it's even because of the Bizarro crowd that I think people read my Barbarian stuff.
Yeah.
Like, they just were into my sort of unconventional, tongue-in-cheek, like, not taking things so seriously kind of route that I take. So, like, when I discovered Bizarro, I think I was, like, browsing through Amazon, and I got looking in my, like, recommendations, and I saw a book called The Haunted Vagina by Carlton Mellick III.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even, like, the title, The Haunted Vagina, that caught my attention. It was, like, the cover. It was, like, this cool-looking, pale demon chick with horns who looked just like something from, like, a fantasy book that I would want to write. So I clicked on it, and I saw that, it says... I remember seeing on the back cover of the book, in the preview, it said, "This is a Bizarro book." So I looked it up, and then I found, like, the Bizarro groups on Facebook. I think this was, like, late 2012. And I was like, these people... I mean, I don't think I fall quite in line with what these people are writing, but, they might be interested. So I took a chance, and I joined those groups, and I kind of saw that some people were posting links to books they wrote, so, you always have to be careful doing that in a Facebook group.
Yeah.
But the way I remember it, like, there was one day of the week that was specifically reserved for authors to post their links. So I posted a link to the Halloween Orgy Massacre, and the weirdest thing that ever happened was people were interested in it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, wow, this looks really cool. I'll check this out. As opposed to, the horror groups that were like, fuck off, kid. And so, yeah, and I mean, the number of friends I've made from the Bizarre community is astronomical. And, I think part of what's cool about them is, even though I don't think I write capital B Bizarro, the fact that they're into it, and, that's pretty awesome. Like, they seem to be a pretty open-minded community.
Yeah, and it's interesting how that works. And I mean, I've always been obsessed with how you gain followers or how you do that. And it seems like, yeah, just posting a link to your book every day doesn't do anything. But then getting involved with other groups or, reviewing other people's stuff and then they look at yours or, publishing in anthologies or whatever, it's like you kind of can dip into those other spheres of influence and, maybe win people over that they'll come and check your stuff out on a regular basis. And that's kind of with Bizarro, I've met some like-minded people out of that. And, I've been able to get some people that have said, okay, you're not necessarily Bizarro, but they'll read my stuff regularly or they'll post on my pages and get into my stuff. So that's definitely been helpful. And I don't really get into the there's a lot of, I guess, controversy or politics or whatever you want to. It seems like there's always some outrage every other week that people try to drag you into, and that's kind of the one bummer about. And it's not really the fault of the Bizarro movement, but it seems like there are people that will remain nameless that can get into that and like to start up shit, and it's interesting how many like divisions there have been where people are like, well, fuck this movement, I'm gonna go and do my own movement, and
and that tells me like these people who say that, like, oh, this person said this, and how people can tolerate that, and I'm quitting Bizarro. I'm like, well, were you just there trying to fit in somewhere in the first place, or are you there to write books and try to get people to read them?
Yeah, it's interesting that the dynamics of that group sometimes spin off a little weird, but then you get that with any group. I mean, you look at punk music or anything else. There's always like somebody that's like, well, fuck you guys, or I'm offended by this, or I can do this better without you, or whatever's going on. But I try to steer clear of that stuff, even if I do have a few good shit posts that I can think of about it. I'm just
yeah. I mean, I can't lie. I've been sucked into it in the past. But I got some very sage-like advice from a guy named Terry West. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a horror writer based out of the West Coast, and he used to write some sort of like soft... He was pretty well-known being a screenwriter for some softcore porn stuff.
Yeah.
Like Spider Babe, and I'm pretty sure he did Lord of the G-Strings. But anyways, he wrote the introduction for Groom of Big Boobenstein, which was like an amazing thing for me because I was familiar with this guy's work. We used to play drinking games to those softcore porn movies.
Yeah.
And something he just said in the intro was like, he caught on to me and gave me the time of the day because I seemed like a pretty okay dude, like well-behaved. And he said something like to the extent of, why writers feel the need to show their asshole to the world is beyond me. And that kind of resonated within me. And I'm like, yeah, like, it kind of made me look at, like, internet behavior differently. Like, people are here, I mean, for the main reason of selling books. And they're basically just showing people what douchebags they are. Or how petty they are, or, like, making some asinine bullshit totally public.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain amount of narcissism in pushing your books, and sometimes it seems like those things clash. I mean, there's certain writers that, you have to be into yourself to some extent to push books, and I guess it's just how you do that can sometimes grate people wrong, and and when it blows up big, it can become big. I mean, I can think of 2 or 3 things even this year that have taken off like that. But yeah, life is too short.
Yeah, that's kind of the conclusion I've come to. Like, I'm 35, married, got a house, 4 dogs. I think it's all downhill from here, so I might as well enjoy the time.
Yeah, and there are enough other things to get self-involved with that I don't have to. I could go read CNN, or I could go, pay attention to the people in my condo board that are always arguing about whatever the fuck they're arguing about this week.
I mean, just reading and writing and creating new characters and new worlds, that's my passion. And when I'm not doing that, I'm perfectly happy. I'd rather be out in my backyard on my hammock looking at the sky for UFOs than engaging in some dumb bullshit on Facebook.
Yeah, and so UFOs, I think I have a big book that I've been writing and not writing for a couple of years, for like 5 years now, about a UFO cult. And it's UFOs have been a big thing. So what is your angle on this? I know you just posted a picture from the Hill abduction site.
Yes. I'm actually, that's about an hour and 15 minutes from my house.
Wow.
I've actually made friends with the guy who's responsible for having that marker put up there. So let's see. Wow, UFOs, my stance. I think that there's absolutely something going on. I take part in a monthly meetup group for people with all varieties of experiences, like people who are just interested, people who have experienced various levels of experience. I guess best way to say it, like, they don't really like the word abductee. They prefer, just to say they've had an experience. It's a pretty fascinating thing for me, at least. And I've heard enough stories from different people, from all different walks of life. You expect someone who says they've been abducted by aliens to be like a sci-fi geek, someone who wants that to happen. I've talked to like Baptist church ministers, steel workers, like people with, basically what I'm trying to say is people with no interest in science fiction or conspiracies whatsoever who have had these experiences. So I've heard and seen enough for me to believe that there's really something going on. I've seen, 2 occasions, I've seen things in the sky that, lack any type of rational explanation.
Yeah.
So I've seen and heard enough to believe that there really is, there's something going on. I can't say I know what it is. I don't think anybody really knows, except those who have had the 4th kind of experience. But I'm absolutely what I would say an open-minded believer.
That's cool. Yeah, those meetings kind of fascinate me. I want to find one out here, but because there's, what is it, MUFON?
Yep,
is one of the groups.
Well, you're in California. MUFON is huge in California.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I've Googled around and looked at this stuff while I was doing research for this book, and it's interesting to me how these groups, it's almost like the Bizarro thing. Like, there's these big groups, and then there's split offs, and they're like, no, Lazar is a fuckhead. I'm not going to go to your meetings anymore, or whatever. It's just like it's the same kind of thing, and that is as interesting to me as if there are actually aliens out there. It's just like the way that the humans interact with each other and stuff like that. And it's definitely, I'm a skeptic. I think, if the universe is infinite, that means something's got to be out there.
Of course.
But I'm more interested in that aspect. And I'm a conspiracy nut to a certain degree with military stuff. And I know out in Nevada they've probably got some stuff that looks like UFOs that's really some drone money pit they're throwing. They're doing something. And I went out there to Area 51. I guess it was almost exactly 2 years ago because I just saw some posts on Facebook from my, on this day.
Yeah.
But I drove out there to Rachel to try to see how close I could get, which is, I would say it's a pretty good experience. I would say don't do it in the beginning of July like I did because it was 118 degrees outside. And I'm driving in a rental car and hoping that the damn thing doesn't break 2 hours from civilization. And I'll have to pay $10,000 to tow it back. But the Little Alien Cafe is an interesting little place to stop.
They showed that in that movie Paul, that Simon Pegg, Nick Frost movie.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was a real place.
Yeah, it's a little kitschy, but it's interesting. I mean, it's just a little, almost like a truck stop diner or something out in the middle of nowhere. And it's, unfortunately, you can't really get that close to Area 51 itself. They actually, I think they just expanded the borders even more. There's one place that you can climb up a mountain, and which, based on my physique, is not going to happen. And you can climb up a mountain, and if you have a $1,000 camera, and you aim it all the way out, you can get a very blurry image of the very edge of it. But the Little Alien is it's a cool place to look. They got a nice little bar there that people, staple up different, postcards or, money from whatever, some German mark note or something. They'll, different artifacts, knickknacks, and they got the T-shirts, and I got a good self-published book about all the military stuff out there when they built that base and all that stuff, when they were testing the stealth fighters and all that. And the other thing too, and I should post this video at some point, but when I was there I think it was in '99, if you're at the Luxor Hotel and you're staying on the east side of it, if you look across the road, you can see the terminal where they fly daily flights out there to Groom Lake. For the people that work there and commute, like the people that work for I don't know if it's the NSA or the engineers and stuff, they fly a daily 737 out there, round trip. And if you stay in the Luxor and you look down, you can see those jets. I mean, you Google this, there's tons of information on the internet about it now. But you can see those guys flying out there every day, so they're doing something out there. But,
there's no doubt about it.
But that's always, I'm always into any of that kind of, weird tourism. That's why I kind of like that picture of that plaque you posted the other day. But
well, if you, I don't know, maybe you have read it. If you haven't, there's a book called The Day After Roswell.
Yeah.
By Philip Corso, retired Army colonel.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're into Area 51 at all, check it out, because that guy, I mean, the fact that he waited till he was almost dead to write that book, I think is kind of telling.
Yeah, Roswell's another thing too, and I've driven through Roswell once, and I need to go back. My sister-in-law was going to school in Albuquerque, and she just graduated, so I should have went out there while she was there. But I'm also into nuclear tourism a little bit, and I was out there looking for one of the test sites for one of the underground tests they did in New Mexico, and that's kind of close to Roswell. And I've been out to the Trinity site with the first atomic test, and when I was driving out of there, you're pretty close to Roswell. But I think I stopped at Pizza Hut and looked at their museum that they have there. Wasn't open the day I was there or something like that, so I missed that.
Well, there's those museums are usually about as big a tourist trap as you can find.
Yeah, and those are always interesting. Like, even today on Facebook, I was talking to somebody about Tesla, the scientist, not the car. And there's or the band. In Colorado Springs, there's a dude that has a Tesla museum, and it's like I think it's in an apartment complex. You have to call him up first, and then make an appointment if he answers the phone, and then you go over there and he'll just like some old guy that's going to talk to you about chemtrails for 2 hours. But any of that stuff is, I should go dig that guy up.
The Betty and Barney Hill Museum, which I've been to twice, it's just down the road from where that marker is. I posted a picture of me and my wife in front of the museum, like there's this big alien mural. But what you'd see is, if the camera panned back a little further, is that it's a mobile station.
Yeah.
And this is what the museum consists of, is this mural of an alien. And then you go inside, the mobile station, and they basically just have newspaper clippings relating to the Betty and Barney Hill incident on the wall. And that's it.
There was there's an alien visitor center on the way to, they name that the extraterrestrial highway now. I forget the number, but right when you turn off of that, there's actually my book the cover of it is that alien.
Yes.
It's an alien statue.
Great cover, by the way. That's like my favorite cover.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and but it's funny because you go in there and you see that alien, and I took those black and white pictures and stuff, and it's cool. Yeah. But then that place is basically a liquor store that has a couple of T-shirts in it.
Yeah.
I think it was actually closed the day I was there, but I just walked around the parking lot and took the pictures. But yeah, it's basically liquor store with some vape products, and I mean, now that weed is legal out there, I'm sure they'll open that up too. But yeah, those places always crack me up. So we haven't even talked about your newest book yet, and which is, I was reading The Very True Stories, which these are all 100% true stories, right?
You're damn right they are.
Yeah. I didn't know how much we could go into that without doing spoilers, but yeah, that was an interesting one. I know you were pushing that for a while, and was looking at it, and I didn't know what kind of stories you were going to pull from your life, I guess you'd say. But that's definitely one to check out. And you sent me one of your zines. Are you doing? And that's not a Kindle thing or whatever. That's just you mailed those out.
That's just I'd not even mail it out. I've only done that PDF docs. Like I said, I'm really fucking lazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are, just a collection of funny shit, really short stories, haikus and flashes, and some other like funny photo manipulations I did. But yeah, that was just something like funny thing to do while I'm not really focusing or able to focus on any of the bigger projects.
Yeah, and so your next book, well, this podcast will probably come out after your book, but any spoilers on that, or you want to talk about or no?
The next book coming out is it's a spin-off of the Byron the Barbarian series. In the second book, Byron meets kind of like a sidekick.
Yeah.
A dwarf who is a drunken, womanizing 4'8" asshole, basically. And I had more fun with that character than I did with Byron, because, the world has a million barbarians, 6'5" Conans, but doesn't have enough 4'8" horny, drunken dwarf barbarians. So I decided he needed his own book, so I gave him an origin story. And I'm hoping that'll, I'm working on the second book to that series now. So hopefully that will pick up and maybe get a little more momentum than Byron has.
And what's this guy's name?
Oberol.
Okay. You didn't name him Hank.
No, I do miss Hank dearly.
Yeah, you were a big Sternhead back in the day, or were you?
Yeah, I don't listen much anymore, but late '90s, up until until Artie left, but oh god, yeah, those were the golden years of Stern. when they had Jackie the Joke Man and for about probably like 96 to 2007, like that was some great radio.
When I lived in Seattle and like when Private Parts came out and stuff like that, I went through a thing where, I read his books and I watched the movie, and you could watch it on E. They would have those cut, but they were all like cut up and put together clip shows. But I couldn't listen out in Seattle. But when I would travel, like I'd go to LA for a week or something, then I could listen. And then I think like that rarity made me hooked.
Yeah.
And then I moved to New York and listened for a little while. And I was just like, I didn't have a job that really was conducive to me spending 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
Listening. So it was kind of, and I wasn't commuting on, whatever. The technology wasn't there to really record the MP3s and listen to it on the subway or whatever, so I kind of fell out. But I did see Stuttering John's band.
They were called Stuttering John, right?
I forget what they were called, but I think I saw him open for Quiet Riot.
Yeah, I had their album.
Yeah, I think I bought the album when I was at the show, just because you have to. But
yeah.
I should see if I've still got pictures of that, because I definitely took pictures of the Quiet Riot. Then this was before their lead singer died, so it was. I think it was right before, actually. So I wish I would have like bootlegged that.
Oh God, yeah.
Made a couple bucks off of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool. Well. Do we miss anything?
No, I don't think so. I think I should mention that people should go out and buy, books like Big Boobenstein and Heart-Shaped Box. But other than that, no, I think we covered everything.
Okay, and I'll put some links on the show notes for that. We can visit you don't have a website, but we can...
You can add me on Facebook or check me out on Amazon.
Yeah, you've got the author page on Amazon, so that's a good start. And you've got all your books. And I think you edit a lot of books, too.
Yeah, I edit for New Kink Books, which is an offshoot of Rooster.
Yeah.
So, and I do freelance, too.
Yeah, because I think when you search on your name, a lot of those books pop up, too. So, on Amazon. So that's something else to check out there. So, okay, cool. Well, we will, I'll see you in meme space.
Yes, you will.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot.
All right, man. Take care.